Rama Rama Hare Hare. One more time again, very loudly. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I can hear you at the back. A little louder. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our evening Bhagavad Gita circle reading program. We welcome devotees to joining us, and we are happy to have His Grace Balabhadra Prabhu back with us. We missed your association, Prabhu.
Thank you.
We hope you're feeling better.
Yes, yes.
You got your voice back. Haribol.
Yes.
So nice to have you again with us, Prabhu. And without further delay, Prabhu, you can start right in. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will appreciate Prabhu. Hare Krishna. God.
Haribo, Haribo.
Glory to the Prabhupada.
Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatale Starne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Go Bhakta Vrinda Ki Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from chapter 6, last verse, text number 47. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmanah Shadavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo matah. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinking of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Purport. The word bhajate is significant here. Bhajate has its root in the verb bhaj, which is used when there is need of service. The English word worship cannot be used in the same sense as bhaj. Worship means to adore or to show respect and honor to the worthy one. But service with love and faith is especially meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can avoid worshiping a respectable man or a demigod and may be called discourteous. But one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Lord without being thoroughly condemned. Every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus every living entity is intended to serve the Supreme Lord by his own constitution. Failing to do this, he falls down. The Bhagavatam 11.5.3 confirms this as follows: Yesham Purusham Sakshat Atma Prabhavam Ishvaram Nabhajant Yava Jananti Stanad Brashta Patant Yada. Anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the primeval Lord, who is the source of all living entities, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. In this verse also the word bhajanti is used. Therefore, bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or to any other common living entity. The word avajananti used in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is also found in the Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti mam mudha. Only the fools and rascals deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Such fools take it upon themselves to write commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita without an attitude of service to the Lord. Consequently, they cannot properly distinguish between the word bhajanti and the word worship. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in Bhakti Yoga. Yoga actually means Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are progressions toward the destination of Bhakti Yoga. From the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma Yoga without fruit of results is the beginning of this path. When Karma Yoga increases in knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called Jnana Yoga. When Jnana Yoga increases in meditation on the Supersoul by different physical processes, and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga Yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga Yoga and comes to the point of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, it is called Bhakti Yoga, the culmination. Factually, Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal. But to analyze Bhakti Yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the path, the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, It is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga. Just as when we speak of the Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune that one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. The ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shyamasundara, who is as beautifully colored as a cloud, whose lotus-like face is as effulgent as the sun, whose dress is brilliant with jewels, and whose body is flower garlanded. Illuminating all sides is his gorgeous luster, which is called the Brahmajyoti. He incarnates in different forms such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he descends like a human being as the son of Mother Jashoda. And he is known as Krishna, Govinda, and Vasudeva. He is the perfect child, husband, friend, and master. And he is full with all opulences and transcendental qualities. If one remains fully conscious of these features of the Lord, he is called the highest yogi. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by Bhakti Yoga, as is confirmed in all Vedic literature. Yasya deve para bhaktir, yata deve tata guru, tashaite katita yarta, prakashante mahatmana. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Svetasvatara Upanishad 6.23. Bhaktir asya bhajanam tat iha mutropadi nairasye namusmin mana kalpanam etat eva naiskarmyam. Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord, which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or in the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb the mind in the Supreme. That is the purpose of Naiskarmyam. Gopala Tapani, Upanishad 1.15. These are some of the means for performance of bhakti, or Krishna consciousness, the highest perfectional stage of the yoga system. Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Dhyana Yoga, beginning chapter 7. Knowledge of the Absolute. Text 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Maya Shakta Mana Partha Yogam Yunjan Marashraya Asam Shayam Samagramam Yata Gyayasi Touch Trinu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Report, in this 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna consciousness is fully described. Krishna is full in all opulences, and how he manifests such opulences is described herein. Also, 4 kinds of fortunate people who become attached to Krishna and 4 kinds of unfortunate people who never take to Krishna are described in this chapter. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the living entity has been described as non-material spirit soul, capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different types of yogas. At the end of the 6th chapter, it has been clearly stated that the steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or in other words, Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one is able to know the absolute truth completely, but not otherwise. Impersonal Brahmajyotir, or localized Paramatma realization, is not perfect knowledge of the absolute truth. because it is partial. Full and scientific knowledge is Krishna, and everything is revealed to the person in Krishna consciousness. In complete Krishna consciousness, one knows that Krishna is ultimate knowledge beyond any doubts. Different types of yoga are only stepping stones on the path of Krishna consciousness. One who takes directly to Krishna consciousness automatically knows about Brahma Jyotir and Paramatma in full. By practice of Krishna consciousness yoga, one can know everything in full, namely the absolute truth, the living entities, the material nature, and their manifestations with paraphernalia. One should therefore begin yoga practice as directed in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Concentration of the mind upon Krishna, the Supreme, is made possible by prescribed devotional service in 9 different forms, of which Shravanam, the first and most important. The Lord therefore says to Arjuna, touch Trinu, or hear from me. No one can be a greater authority than Krishna. And therefore, by hearing from him, one receives the greatest opportunity to become a perfectly Krishna conscious person. One has therefore to learn from Krishna directly or from a pure devotee of Krishna, and not from a non-devotee upstart, puffed up with academic education. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this process of understanding Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is described in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto as follows. Srinvatam Sokata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyanta Stotya Badrani Vidunoti Suritsatam Nasta Praista Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Tadara Justamo Bhava Kamalobhadayaschaye Cheta Etara Nadvidham Stitham Satve Prasidati Evam Prasana Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga Taha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantis Chijante Sarva Samshaya Shiyante Chasya Karmani Drishta Evatmanishvare. Translation. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of asamshayam samagram, understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead. Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, verses 17 to 21. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Text number 2. Jnanam teham savijnanam idam bhaksham yasheshata yat gatva neha bhuyon yaj gyatavyam avasishyate. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. Purport. Complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world, the spirit behind it, and the source of both of them. This is transcendental knowledge. The Lord wants to explain the above-mentioned system of knowledge because Arjuna is Krishna's confidential devotee and friend. In the beginning of the 4th chapter, this explanation was given by the Lord, and it is again confirmed here. Complete knowledge can be achieved only by the devotee of the Lord in disciplic succession directly from the Lord. Therefore, one should be intelligent enough to know the source of all knowledge, who is the cause of all causes, and the only object for meditation in all types of yoga practice. When the cause of all causes becomes known, then everything knowable becomes known, and nothing remains unknown. The Vedas, Mukunda Upanishad 1.1.3 say, Kasmin u bhagavo vigyate sarvam idam vigatam bhavati ti. Wow. Text number 3. Manushanam sahasreshu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatatamapi siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvata. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Purport. There are various grades of men, and out of many thousands, one may be sufficiently interested in transcendental realization to try to know what is the self, what is the body, and what is the absolute truth. Generally, mankind is simply engaged in the animal propensities, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. And hardly anyone is interested in transcendental knowledge. The first 6 chapters of the Gita are meant for those who are interested in transcendental knowledge, in understanding the self, the supreme, the super self, and the process of realization by Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and discrimination of the self from matter. However, Krishna can be known only by persons who are in Krishna consciousness. Other transcendentalists may achieve impersonal Brahman realization, but this is easier than understanding Krishna. Krishna is the supreme person, but at the same time, he is beyond the knowledge of Brahman and Paramatma. The yogis and jnanis are confused in their attempts to understand Krishna. Although the greatest of the impersonalists, Shripad Sankaracharya, has admitted in his Gita commentary that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his followers do not accept Krishna as such, for it is very difficult to know him or to know Krishna, even though one has transcendental realization of impersonal Brahman. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the primeval Lord Govinda. Ishwar Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. It is very difficult for the non-devotees to know him. Although non-devotees declare that the path of bhakti or devotional service is very easy, they cannot practice it. If the path of bhakti is so easy, as the non-devotee class of men proclaim, then why do they take up the difficult path? Actually, the path of bhakti is not easy. The so-called path of bhakti practiced by unauthorized persons without knowledge of bhakti may be easy, but when it is practiced factually according to the rules and regulations, the speculative scholars and philosophers fall away from the path. Srila Rupa Goswami writes in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.101, Shruti, Smriti, Paranadi, Pancharatra, Vidhim, Vina, Aikantiki Harer Bhaktir, Upatat Yaiva Kalpate. Devotional service of the Lord that ignores the authorized Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Puranas, and Narada Pancharatra is simply an unnecessary disturbance in society. It is not possible for the Brahman realized impersonalist or the Paramatma realized yogi to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the son of Mother Yashoda, or the charioteer of Arjuna. Even the great demigods are sometimes confused about Krishna. Muyanti yat surya, mam tu veda nakaschana. No one knows me as I am, the Lord says. And if one does know him, then samahatma sadhulabha. Such a great soul is very rare. Therefore, unless one practices devotional service to the Lord, one cannot know Krishna as he is, tattvata, even though One is a great scholar or philosopher. Only the pure devotees can know something of the inconceivable transcendental qualities in Krishna, his being the cause of all causes, his omnipotence and opulence, and his wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Because Krishna is benevolently inclined to his devotees. He is the last word in Brahman realization, and the devotees alone can realize him as he is. Therefore, it is said, Atasi Krishna Namadi Nabhave Graham Indriya Seva Mukhe Jivado Swayameva Sparachada. No one can understand Krishna as he is by the blunt material senses, but he reveals himself to the devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service unto him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.234. So with that, we'll stop. Haribol.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for such a wonderful reading. I had to pull up the verse on my screen so I can make some notes as you were reading, because pretty amazing points, Thank you, Prabhu. Would like to ask devotees if you have any questions, any takeaways, any clarification, or just, would like to share some thoughts that, that really hit us or reflected upon us as we were hearing. Please do unmute yourself and ask a question or jump right in. I'm just going down the list. I was trying to get my thoughts in. And the first one that that was coming to my mind, Prabhu, is, I don't know if it was the beginning of chapter 7 or the last couple of verses in chapter 6, where Srila Prabhupada was saying that Shravanam is the first and the most.
Yes.
Like, we know it's the first, but I feel with my limited knowledge that we don't think it's the most, because once we go down to number 2, number 3, number 4, then we think we've we've perfected the first, so we don't need to go back to the first, So that was my reflection, that not only is it the first, but it is the most important.
Yeah, and that can be understood from an academic perspective, just like people who go to college or even any form of school. What's the most important thing? Hearing. I gave this example the other day. If you go to a university, especially, and you walk in and you tell the teacher what's going to be taught today. In other words, you're not coming there to hear from the teacher. You're coming there to tell him what he should be teaching today. Okay, Mr. Jones, today you are going to do this, and that. Mr. Jones will say, get out of here. You're not a qualified student. Why? Because you're not ready to listen. And then they check to see if you've listened. And that reminds me of 1973 and 4, at the old Atlanta temple with our president, Balavanta Prabhu. He was so focused on hearing. It was the most important thing for all of us to do. So he had a policy. If you were working in the kitchen or you were working on the altar during the Bhagavatam class, you had to write a couple of paragraphs essay. What was that class about that morning? He wanted to make sure you heard it, because if you didn't hear, how are you going to, first of all, how are you going to be purified? Srimvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. Nasta Praisa Badruso Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. All those things are important, but if you don't hear, it doesn't work. So if you don't hear sufficiently, and then Prabhupada said also, if you hear sufficiently, then you can speak sufficiently. Like this devotee who was conducting our teaching program, Bhakti Shastri teaching program, and he said it so beautifully. He said, just like an ocean, you just fill yourself with the glories of Krishna, constantly filling yourself every day, reading Prabhupada's books. And then when the opportunity is there, it flows out. Very naturally flows out. But if you don't hear, you know how the Karmis say, you got 2 of these and 1 of those. So you should hear twice as much as you speak. So if you hear sufficiently, then the other processes, they fall in place. What is it? Shravanam Kirtana. If you don't hear, how you will do Kirtana? Then if you don't hear and do Kirtanam, then how Smaranam, where is it going to come from? Vishnu Smaranam. So yeah, it is the first and the most important in any sphere of life. Suppose you go work at a new job and you're wet behind the ears, and then the more experienced person is trying to guide you, but you're arguing with that person. That's such a bothersome thing. When you're trying to, educate a person or guide a person or share Krishna consciousness with a person, and they just argue with you. I had this one devotee, he was a new bhakta. He turned out to be an amazing devotee, but my God, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. He knew the answers before I opened my mouth. He knew it better than me, and I've been around like 15, 20 years. This guy's been around for a couple of days, and he's just arguing and on and on and on. But after perfecting the art of hearing, he became a very, very solid devotee. Now he's actually a PhD now, but in the beginning, he just couldn't hear. I'll give you a different example. Most of you know Sariputta Prabhu, the great ISKCON scientist, but you don't know, like I know him, he was Bhakti Richard in Atlanta, because all the scientists came to Atlanta. Sariputta, Sarup Damodar Maharaj, the whole Bhaktivedanta Institute started in Atlanta. Prabhupada came, and they all came. So Sariputta was Bhakti Richard, Richard Thompson. I didn't know he was a PhD. I just knew he was Bhakti Richard. Bhakti Richard, you idiot, go sweep the floor. And he would just go sweep the floor. Bhakti Richard, do this. He would just immediately do it. And then someone said, Balabaji, don't you realize he's a PhD? I went, Bhakti Richard is a PhD? He was so humble. It didn't mean anything to him, all his scientific knowledge. He was just trying to be a devotee. And when he danced in kirtan, it was like watching Lord Chaitanya. I'm not exaggerating. He was so absorbed in hearing the holy name, and it just took him to another dimension. I miss his association so much because even though he knew more than everyone else, he listened more than everyone else. So I just wanted to share that example of hearing properly and not hearing properly. And another quick example is Delhi, 1976. We were there with Prabhupada, gave a lecture that night. And Lokanath Maharaj was on the stage with Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada spoke in Hindi, so I don't know exactly what he said. I just know when he would quote a verse, then I could catch it. But he spoke in Hindi. But then he was explaining about proper hearing. And hearing means action, is what Prabhupada was explaining. So Lokanath Maharaj said something in Hindi to a man sitting in the audience, and the man got up and walked toward the stage. And then he said, see, he heard, because he carried out the instruction. Now he heard it. So now he's carrying out the instruction. So when you're hearing properly, then you definitely start to implement, right? Jnana, Vijnana. The truth, the proof that you heard is the fact that you engage in that activity. So we've heard, how much have we heard about chanting the holy names? How important it is, and hearing and reading these books. So we should question ourselves, how much do I do that? And when I'm doing it, am I giving full attention to that? That tesam sattva-yuktanam bhajitam pritipurvakam, that loving service, and hearing is also service, so lovingly hearing. Then Krishna will bless us, Dadami Buddhi Yoga. He gives the understanding. So those are just some thoughts.
I mean, really amazing, Prabhu, because I have another question, but I want to see if anyone else has a question to ask before I follow up with what you just said. Okay, I can jump right in. Oh, cool. So, Prabhu, what are the symptoms of one who is attentively hearing, and how can one develop the art of hearing?
I wish I could quote something specific. I'm trying to, go through my brain, but just from the basic side, following up with what I said earlier, the hearing should produce action, number one. Okay. Attentive hearing is mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't give the exact quote, but in Nectar of Devotion, I think there's a chapter or a segment that talks about hearing, the art of hearing. And I was just reading today from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, the story about the Prachetas and how when they began their austerities, they met Lord Shiva. And then there's a chapter there, it's called Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva. And he's talking to these Prachetas, and they are so attentive. So because they were attentive in hearing Lord Shiva, and then they did their austerities for how many, 10,000 years or something like that. And after that, the Lord came to them. Lord Shiva told them that the Lord will, you'll be blessed, the Lord will come. So because they heard attentively from Lord Shiva, they were able to see the Lord. So if we attentively hear, which is tantamount to being in the presence of the Lord. Tantamount meaning basically one thing is equal to the other. So this attentive hearing, by the grace of the Lord reveals himself to such devotees. Not necessarily in his threefold bending form, but through the process of realization, because the Lord is in the heart as a supersoul. So that attentive hearing is extremely important. And the results of that is we make progress in Krishna consciousness. So again, in the Nectar Devotion, there's more detail about hearing, the process of hearing. Also in the second canto with Sukadeva Goswami, there's some aspects of that. I just don't have it in front of me to give you the exact pages and all that. But
thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Because sometimes I come across situations where one devotee is telling something to another devotee, hoping and expecting that the devotee is hearing. And then there's silence when one devotee is talking to the other, but then it flips around when the other person is responding and they didn't hear what you said.
yes.
And I was that's why I was wondering what are the symptoms of one who's hearing and does that mean that when one is hearing they follow through, or does it mean that one is hearing and they can contradict or
well, they ask questions. In other words, if a person is seriously trying to practice devotional service, then you're speaking, say, giving a lecture or you're giving some instruction. And in order to do action, because that's also in the Bhagavad Gita. Oh my God, I wish I could remember the exact place. Which chapter is that? Where Prabhupada says that Krishna gave a series of explanations in all these beginning chapters. And then a more clear path would be necessary for action. And that's in the purport. He says that more clear explanation, because he gave all this karma yoga, jnana yoga, all these different yogas and this and that. But Arjuna needed something more specific that he could grab onto. And Prabhupada mentions that in the purport. A more systematic explanation would be required for specific action. Therefore, the first purpose in ISKCON is what? To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge. Because in order for the action to take place, you need to know, for instance, any type of like art or music, when you're trying to study that, you need to know exactly really what the end result's going to be. What does it look like? What is the shape? What is the sound? And then they tell you exactly how to do it. And then when you start doing it, you get confidence. When someone tells you to do something and you do it and it works, you get confidence. But if you never do it, then how do you know? Then you become like, oh, that's why people are afraid, even devotees, okay? They get scared and sometimes they leave the movement and, because they're hearing, but they're not applying. So to your point, Anasuya Prabhu, is that there are many tests. One test that the person's actually hearing is that they begin to ask questions to clarify whatever they're not sure about. And then when they're a little more confident, then they do the action so they can see the result like that. It's very, very practical. Very practical.
Thank you, Prabhu.
But one symptom of someone who's not listening is when you're trying to explain, they're cutting you off. So they're not listening. Or they're arguing, prematurely arguing with you. You can't, like I said, you can't get a word in edgewise. It's like they're really not listening because they think they already know. And that's the thing that kind of saddens me when I know they don't know and you're trying to help them understand, but they're trying to act like they know. And it's like, you're going down the wrong path. I've been down that path. I've seen it. I've been corrected by so many devotees. Don't go that way. Yeah, but, okay, fine. So Prabhupada says it's like a father. Sometimes he'll let the child touch the fire. Okay, go ahead. And hopefully they experience, because see, that kind of learning is not the highest form of learning, experiential learning. The highest form is when you, as Prabhupada quoted from the 4th chapter, Evam parampara praptam imam rajasayovidu, right? That's the highest form, accepted through the disciplic succession. Why you want to argue with it? Do you know Krishna? Have you seen him? No. Then you take it from the acharyas. and you learn it, you hear it the way Arjuna heard it. And if you hear it that way, it's the same as hearing Krishna directly. So there's so many techniques and details and specific things that a person can do to make rapid advancement. But if they're not listening, which is first and foremost, it's very hard to make advancement.
And Prabhu, sometimes I come across situations where, like you said, we've been there, we've seen it, we've walked that path, and and we give the advice, we give the instruction, but they appear to be listening, but they come with a motive and with the attachments, but so I don't know if that's open hearing, or is it closed hearing, or
Improper
selective hearing?
Selective, improper hearing. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that's what I go through sometimes, those challenges. Thank you, Prabhu. Any questions from the devotees before we wrap up this reading program? Any thoughts, any clarification, any add-ons? You could unmute yourself and ask. And if you don't, thank you so much, Balabhadra Prabhu, for giving us this time. And it's so nice to have you back with us again. We really missed your association, and we're happy that you're well and healthy.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing the devotees tomorrow on our morning Bhakti class. Until then, Vanchakaptivyascha,
Kripasindevacha, Patitanam Bhavnebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo,
Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Haribol, Parikshit.